I'm going to start by saying this was a normal day, and that's the part that still bothers me. I was 16 years old, a junior at a public high school in the Midwest, and nothing about that morning stood out. It was just another weekday. Same bus ride, same hallway smells, same tired faces. It was late morning, second period, and I was sitting in the back row of my English class. The room was quiet except for pencils moving and rain tapping against the windows. Outside, the sky was gray, the kind of steady rain that makes everything feel slower. Our teacher was reading from a worksheet, and most of us were half listening. I remember thinking about lunch. That's honestly where my head was. I wasn't scared. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't paying attention to anything except the clock. Then I noticed something small that didn't feel right. The classroom door was already locked. That wasn't normal. Teachers only locked doors during drills or after school. I remember looking at the handle and feeling confused, not afraid yet, just aware. I assumed maybe the teacher had done it without thinking. A few seconds later, the hallway went quiet. Not the normal class time quiet. The kind of quiet where even distant sounds disappear.
No lockers closing. No voices. No footsteps.
Just the rain outside and the low hum of the lights. Our teacher stopped talking mid-sentence.
She didn't say anything.
She just looked toward the door. Her face changed, but she tried to hide it. She walked over and checked the lock again, slowly, like she didn't want to make noise. That's when the intercom made a clicking sound. It didn't turn on right away. It clicked, went silent, then clicked again. That pause felt longer than it probably was. Everyone in the room was watching the speaker above the whiteboard. Before any announcement came through, I heard something else. A sound from the hallway. It was faint, but it was close. Something brushed against the lockers outside our door. Not a bang. Not a crash. More like someone moving carefully, trying not to be heard. A few students noticed it too. I could tell by the way they looked up. No one spoke. No one laughed it off. Then the announcement finally came on. The principal's voice sounded tight. Controlled, but different. She said we were going into lockdown. Not a drill. Doors locked. Lights off. Stay silent until further notice. The room went dark as our teacher turned off the lights. In that moment, before anything actually happened, I felt something settle in my chest. A heavy feeling, like whatever was outside our classroom wasn't supposed to be there. And whatever it was already inside the school. It was a gray, rainy morning at Jefferson High, the kind of day that makes the fluorescent lights inside the school feel harsh and cold. I had gotten there around 7:30 a.m., carrying my backpack, headphones tucked into my pocket, and thinking about the math test I had later that morning. The school smelled like wet coats and cafeteria pizza, a familiar scent I didn't think much about until later. I was a junior, 16 years old, and mostly kept to myself. My best friend, Alex, was the only person I usually hung out with between classes. That morning, we had joked about staying dry in the hallways and compared our soggy sneakers. Everything felt ordinary. Just another rainy day in a school that had been standing for decades, its walls covered in faded posters for sports and clubs, bulletin boards crowded with old announcements, and hallways that always smelled slightly of chalk and cleaning supplies. My first 2 classes had passed uneventfully. In English, we read a short story and quietly worked on the worksheet, while outside the windows, rain slid down in steady streaks. I remember glancing at the clock more than once, impatient for lunch, completely unaware that something unusual was building just a few hallways away. After English, it was time for history. The classroom was on the second floor, at the far end of the building. It was a small room with windows facing the parking lot, old wooden desks, and a heavy metal door that creaked whenever it opened or closed. Our teacher, Mrs. Walters, was mid-40s, strict but fair, someone who had been at Jefferson High longer than most of us had been alive. She was organizing our papers as we walked in, humming softly, completely unaware that the day was about to change. I sat near the back with Alex beside me. The room was warm compared to the wet hallways, and the sound of the rain hitting the windows created a dull, steady rhythm that made it easy to relax. It felt safe, normal, like any other classroom. We joked quietly about the homework, leaning over our desks, unaware that someone or something was already moving through the building. There was nothing threatening about the day at first. Students moved between classes, the bells rang, and the usual noise of lockers slamming echoed down the hallways. Teachers greeted each other in the staff room, and the janitor wheeled a cart of cleaning supplies through the corridors. I had no reason to be worried. Jefferson High was the kind of place where things felt routine. Even when I noticed small things that felt slightly off, the hallway being quieter than usual, the rain masking footsteps outside, the faint echo of doors closing somewhere distant, I didn't think much of it. Maybe a teacher had locked a door by accident. Maybe a student had run late. Nothing in that moment suggested what would happen next. We were just teenagers going about our day, stuck in a school during a rainy Thursday morning. And for now, everything was still normal. But by the end of the next hour, that normal would completely disappear. After Mrs. Walters finished distributing the worksheets, the room settled into quiet work. Most of us were focused on the assignment, pencils scratching across paper. But even in that calm, something felt slightly off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, just a subtle sense that the day wasn't as normal as it seemed. The first thing I noticed was the hallway. I could see it faintly through the small glass window in the classroom door. Normally, there would be some movement, students passing, a janitor pushing a cart, the familiar shuffle of shoes on tile. But now it was still.
Too still.
The hall was empty. Not a single backpack moved. Not even a shadow in the dim fluorescent light. Then came the sound. Faint at first, almost easy to ignore. A soft scraping, like someone dragging a shoe slowly across the floor. It wasn't a locker slamming, not a student joking. It was deliberate, careful. I froze for a moment, listening. Alex nudged me, whispering, "Do you hear that?" I nodded, and we both went quiet. Another small detail caught my attention. The lights in the hallway flickered once, then stayed steady. Nothing major, just a brief moment of darkness that made the space beyond our door feel colder, emptier. Even the rain tapping on the windows seemed louder all of a sudden, more insistent, like it was emphasizing the silence. Then I noticed movement in the corner of the hall, near the science wing. Just a shadow. Too tall to be a student, too slow to be someone walking casually. I blinked, and it disappeared. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was just a coat hanging on a hook that shifted in the breeze from the cracked window. But the feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. A few minutes later, I heard it again. Soft, uneven breathing, coming from somewhere just beyond the door. Not a teacher's voice. Not a student. Close enough that I felt it in my chest. My heart rate picked up, but I forced myself to keep writing, pretending I didn't notice. I could hear other kids fidgeting, whispering, but no one was daring to look out the window. Then came the footsteps. Slow at first, measured, echoing off the tiles. Not walking together. One at a time. Then pause. Then another. It was almost rhythmic, almost like someone testing the doors. I could see Mrs. Walters stiffen, her eyes flicking toward the glass in the door as if she could sense what I felt. The room felt smaller suddenly. The warm fluorescent light overhead didn't feel comforting anymore. My pencil felt heavy in my hand. Alex whispered again, "Do you think someone's in the building?" I didn't answer. I didn't want to say it out loud. Part of me hoped it was nothing. Another part knew it wasn't. By now, everyone was on edge. Conversations had stopped. Fingers tapped nervously on desks. Every creak from the hallway, every drip of rain from the roof, made us flinch. That first hint of fear, subtle, slow, almost invisible, had settled in. The day was no longer normal. Something was inside the school, moving, watching, waiting, and none of us knew just how close it was. By now, the quiet in the classroom had turned heavy. Every small sound outside the door felt amplified. I could hear it clearly this time, a footstep, then a pause, then another. Not random, not accidental. It had a rhythm. Someone was moving deliberately through the hallways. Mrs. Walters had instructed us to stay against the far corner of the room, out of view from the door window. Her voice was low, calm, but I could see her hands shaking slightly as she clutched the edge of her desk. Alex was crouched beside me, whispering, "Who do you think it is?" I didn't answer. I didn't want to think about it. Then came the handle. I heard it jiggle, slow, careful movement, testing the lock. The metal clicked under pressure. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a student. No one at school knew how to pick a lock like that. My palms were sweaty. My pencil slipped from my fingers. I wanted to move, to run, but Mrs. Walters put a hand on my shoulder. "Stay," she whispered. "Don't make a sound." The shadow returned. Not at first through the window. This time I saw it reflected faintly in the hallway tiles. A tall, broad shape, moving from classroom to classroom. I couldn't see a face, but the presence was unmistakable. My throat went dry. I realized I was trapped. The door was locked, but the hall was long, and that shadow could move faster than anyone could react. Then the footsteps changed. They slowed near our door, but the pauses were longer now, deliberate, like the person was listening. Each pause made my heart jump. The breathing was louder too, uneven, heavy enough to feel through the closed door. Every nerve in my body screamed that this was no drill, no harmless prank. Alex and I exchanged glances. I could see the same fear mirrored in his eyes. We weren't children anymore. This was real. The classroom felt smaller. The walls seemed closer. The hum of the lights was the only thing between us, and the shadow in the hall. Then I heard a whisper. Faint, muffled. Not a student. Not a teacher. It came from the hallway. I couldn't make out words, just the sound of someone speaking low and slow. It sent chills down my spine. The shadow moved again, this time closer to our door. I could see it in the reflection, lingering, waiting. Every instinct told me to hide, to run, to scream. But Mrs. Walters' hand on my shoulder kept me still. We were pinned in the corner, the only safe spot in the room. My eyes scanned for escape, but there wasn't one. The hallway was too long. The doors were all locked, and the shadow's presence made moving impossible. Then came the knock. Soft, precise. 3 light taps on the door. Not loud, just enough to be heard. Everyone froze. My stomach turned. The shadow was right there, testing the door, seeing if anyone would respond. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't random. It wasn't searching. It knew we were here. By this point, fear had fully taken over. Every creak, every drip, every faint footstep made my chest tighten. We were trapped, and the shadow outside wasn't going anywhere. Then it happened. The handle rattled violently. Whoever or whatever was out there stopped testing the lock. They were trying to force it open. My heart jumped to my throat. The door shuddered with each pull, and I could hear wood scraping against metal. Mrs. Walters whispered, "Get down. Stay quiet." But the sound of heavy breathing and movement outside made it impossible to ignore the danger. The shadow pressed against the door, a dark shape that seemed to grow taller with every second. I could see it in the faint reflection of the lights on the linoleum floor, broad shoulders, slow, deliberate movements, one arm brushing against the door. Alex and I crouched lower, pressed against the corner of the room. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was no clear exit. The hallway was empty, but that shadow was too close, too powerful. Then the door shook again, harder this time. My hands were trembling.
My throat felt dry.
Suddenly, a loud crash came from the hallway behind us. Someone kicked over a trash can, and the echo made my stomach drop. The shadow paused for a second, and I realized we might have a chance. I whispered to Alex, "When I say now, we run." Mrs. Walters nodded, her face pale but determined.
Now.
We bolted. I grabbed the edge of the door as quietly as I could, then pushed it open and sprinted into the hall. My shoes slipped on the wet tile from the rain tracked in by students earlier. I heard the shadow move behind us. Fast, heavy footsteps that kept pace with our own. I ducked into the nearest classroom, slamming the door and yanking the lock down. Alex followed, nearly tripping over his backpack. We pressed ourselves against the wall, gasping for air, listening. The footsteps stopped outside. Just silence. My heart was hammering so loud, I was sure it could be heard outside. Then a voice, low and rough, whispered something I couldn't understand. My stomach twisted. Whoever it was still there, still hunting. We stayed quiet for what felt like hours, the dim light from the hallway barely illuminating the room. Every creak of the floor, every drip of rain, made us flinch. Finally, I heard voices outside, officers shouting, commands being given. The shadow bolted down the hall in the opposite direction, and I could hear doors banging and someone running. Relief hit, but it was tentative. The danger wasn't gone, it had just moved. When the police finally entered the room, guns drawn, we stumbled out, trembling. Officers guided us to safety, but I couldn't stop looking back at the hall. The shadow was gone, but the fear it left behind lingered. Every corner, every classroom now felt vulnerable. I knew that whatever had been stalking us that morning had been real, and it had almost caught us. Even as we were escorted out of the building, I could still hear the faint echo of those footsteps in my head. And I realized, for the first time, how close we had come to something dangerous and unknown. After the lockdown ended, the police interviewed everyone in our classroom. I was still shaking, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I expected to hear that the person outside had been a student playing a prank, or maybe a parent accidentally wandering into the wrong part of the school. I couldn't have been more wrong. Later that afternoon, a detective came to speak with Mrs. Walters and a few of us who had witnessed the event closely. He handed over a statement from officers who had caught the intruder fleeing through the back hallway. That's when the truth hit. The person in the shadow wasn't a student. He wasn't a teacher, a parent, or even someone who had any connection to the school. He was a stranger. A man in his early 30s with a history of breaking into buildings. What made it worse was what they found on him, a large hunting knife, carefully concealed in his jacket. The police said he had been inside the school for hours before the first lockdown call, moving between classrooms unnoticed. I remember staring at the ceiling after hearing that.
Hours.
He had been inside while we were taking classes, sitting in empty hallways, possibly watching us from just around corners, hiding in closets, or crouching in shadows. Every faint sound we had noticed, the scraping footsteps, the soft breathing, the shadow in the reflection, was him. And we hadn't even seen his face. What shocked me most wasn't just that he was armed or that he had been hiding in the building for so long. It was the realization that he had chosen that specific time and place. He didn't break into the school randomly. He had been waiting for students to be scattered across hallways, waiting for a classroom to be isolated. And he had gotten closer to us than I could even imagine. The detective said they still didn't know why he picked Jefferson High. He had no connection to the school. No known motive. He wasn't after a particular student. He was just inside, moving, watching, and ready to act if someone came in his path. I thought about every detail. The jiggling door handle, the slow, measured footsteps, the soft whisper that had made my blood run cold. All of it was him. All of it planned and deliberate. We hadn't been imagining things. We had been in real danger. Even now, thinking back, I realized something else. He had vanished after that lockdown. Captured moments later by the police. Yes, but the idea that someone unknown had been inside our school, so close, watching, choosing moments when he might strike. It changed everything. It made me understand how vulnerable we had been, and how close we had come to something unthinkable. The twist was simple but horrifying. We weren't just afraid of a shadow or a noise. We had been afraid of a real person, a stranger. And he had been inside, waiting, knowing exactly what he was doing. That truth lingered long after the officers left. It made every classroom, every hallway, every locked door feel fragile, temporary, and unsafe in a way I had never considered before. Even now, I can't shake the thought that he had been there, silent, calm, and dangerous. Hours spent moving between empty classrooms, seeing everything without being seen. It's not a story about ghosts or monsters. It's a story about a person. And that person had been real. Even after the lockdown ended, the feeling of safety never fully returned. The police said the man had been caught and taken into custody, but the thought of him inside the school for hours, moving silently between classrooms, testing doors, hiding in shadows, kept replaying in my mind. Every hallway, every corner, every darkened room suddenly felt like it could be the place where he might return. The strange thing was, no one ever really explained why he had been there.
Motive?
None that they could confirm. Nothing to suggest why he picked that day, that building, that exact time. The detective shrugged when asked, and the official report said simply, "Unknown intruder."
Armed.
No connection to school. That lack of explanation made it worse. It left a gap in my understanding, a gap that fear quickly filled. Even walking past a locked classroom or peeking down an empty hallway made my skin crawl. I would hear a floorboard creak in my own house and imagine him standing there, silent and watching, waiting for a chance. The fear wasn't rational, but it felt real. It was the awareness that someone capable of planning this, of moving with that kind of quiet patience, could exist anywhere. I kept thinking about the small details from that morning. The faint breathing, the shadow in the hallway, the soft taps on our door. At the time, we thought it was just part of the lockdown tension. Now I know better. Those were clues of something very real. And the fact that we never saw his face, never knew his intentions fully, made everything more unsettling. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I imagine what could have happened if we had made a sound. Or if we had left the classroom for any reason. How close was he to stepping inside? How prepared was he to act? That uncertainty haunts me more than any detail from that morning. And even now, years later, every time I return to Jefferson High, I feel the weight of those empty hallways. I know the school is safe now, or at least it should be, but a part of me wonders if anyone truly knows where he had been hiding, or if he had scouted other areas unnoticed. The police report said he was taken away, but I can't stop thinking about the hours we didn't see him. The hours when he could have been anywhere. I still don't know who he really was, or what he might have done if the police hadn't arrived when they did. Every time I walk past a classroom door, I glance at the handle. Every time I hear footsteps echo down a hallway, I tense up. And sometimes, in the back of my mind, I can't shake the thought. Maybe he's not completely gone. Maybe he's somewhere else, waiting, watching, learning. And if he ever comes back to a place like that, we might not be so lucky next time. Because the truth is simple and terrifying. The danger we faced that day wasn't random. It was real, and it could happen again.